Hi, in this video I'm going to quickly go over CSS Designer. It's a new way to create CSS or to add CSS to your web pages in Dreamweaver CC. Dreamweaver CC, CC stands for Creative Cloud, is different than previous versions. Now I'm brand new to CC myself, so you're going to see me fumble through this, but hopefully it'll give you a few basics. So I've already created a site, so now I'm going to create a new HTML file, and I'm going to save it. And I'm going to save it in a folder called CSS Designer. And I'm going to create a new CSS file. Just going to go ahead and do it this way. I found that so far playing with it, it's easier to do it this way. So I'm going to call this CSS Designer, and I'm going to save it in my styles folder. So now that I have both, I'm going to actually close my CSS file, and now that I'm back in my HTML file, I'm going to just add a title, always good practice. And I'm going to make sure I have insert over here, and I'm going to hit, you'll notice that you have a lot of options here now for the HTML tags. I'm going to hit header, and I'm going to change this text to header. Put my cursor right after that. Scroll down, I'm going to hit section. I'm going to change that to section, and I'm going to hit footer. Okay, so now we have some basic HTML tags, but what I'm also going to do is I'm going to add a div ID equals container. So this was something people did for a long time. And I'm going to put my closing div tag outside of this. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to apply source formatting so you can at least see it, and you can see that it's upset because I'm missing my closing tag for my first div. So I fixed that. Here we go. So you can see that you have div ID equals container, and then I have my header tag, my section tag, and my footer tag. So now I'm going to try to go through and talk about some basic things with using CSS Designer. So if I click anywhere on the page, down here I'm going to start with my container. So this is an ID. First thing it wants you to do is it wants you to, and in fact, you can always double click insert to have that collapse, and right now it wants me to identify the source. So you could do the create a new file. I find that is a little confusing, so I went ahead and you saw me do it. I started by creating my own CSS file, and so now I'm going to go here and I'm going to select it. Okay, so that looks good. So now I can go down here, and you might find that you use media a little. For the most part, especially for beginning, you're not going to use it at all. And actually, once you have your source, you're probably not going to use that as much either, but you can still drag this up. And then for selectors, right? So this is where you can hit plus sign. You notice because I have this selected, it goes for my container, right? So then now, make sure that's selected, and you can see that this little designer view down here shows up. So now this is where I can sit here and decide that, I want my width to be in pixels, and then now that I did that, I can type in 960, and maybe I want my padding to be 10 pixels, right? And you can, maybe you want the bottom to be less, right? So you can play with that. So this video isn't meant to really cover everything about CSS, but just give you some basics here. So that tells you, if I go over here to the CSS, I can see that my container, the width, right? This all looks very familiar if you've used previous versions. So now I can, I basically showed you how to add a style to an ID, right? So now I'm going to do just a basic tag, so the body tag, right? So I have body selected. So I have to choose which source. So I'm going to use my CSS Designer, right? And I'm going to hit the plus sign because I have body selected. That's there. So I'm going to hit enter or return, depending on if you're in Mac or PC. And so now I'm going to go across, right? So I have borders. I'm going to actually go to background here, and I'm just going to add a dark background. And this is just for my body, right? So now this is where you just start playing with what you want to do. So if I wanted to go back to my container, I would select here, and I can go back and you can see, right, that with container selected, I can then go back and maybe I want to add a background color for my container to be white. So let's scroll over and you can start to see. And if you jump over, you can see the CSS. So here's a HTML tag that I've added some styles to. Here's a div with an ID equals container that I've added styles to. All right, and so once again, I could type some text, make sure HTML is selected. I could make this an H1 tag. All right, and so if I click over here and make sure that that's selected, H1, this is where I can go over here, make sure CSS is selected, hit plus sign, and this is where sometimes they'll get very specific. I can actually be less specific. Put my cursor back, hit enter, and this is where I could decide, to change some basic things from color. I could change with font family, right? So if I click on that, let's go back. Let's select that again, right? So I can see some different options here. And all right, so now you've seen how to redefine a couple tags. I could do the same thing with the section and the footer, but what I want to do right now is I want to now show you how to add a class. So okay, so now let's say that I want to add a class. Right, so I can highlight this and I want to make it blue. Now you notice in here with the CSS panel and the properties inspector, there's a few options here, right? So I can add a new inline style, I can apply a class, right? Same thing, you should be able to do it over here. And so I haven't actually done this before, so let's give it a go. So I first hit CSS Designer, then I hit plus, right? And it wants to actually redefine just a paragraph. Well, here I'm going to say blue text, right? And so I started with a period, and now this is where I'm going to go down here to color, change it to blue, right? So now you'll notice that it created the class, but it didn't do anything here. So I'm going to have to go back to my page, highlight it, and you should see over here, right? Unless things have changed, there it is, blue text. So I select it, there it is, and you notice that it's blue. Maybe I want the font weight to be different, right? Maybe I want it to be, so this example where I can always hand code too. So I could do font weight, and you can see it starts to come up if you just type in, right? And there, this is where I can go bold, double click, make sure there's semicolon, and just like that. And so you can do this always in full design view. So we'll do one more thing. So let's say for the footer, perhaps I want to make that a smaller text, because often a footer text is the small stuff at the end, all right, or bottom of the page. I make sure I select my source. All right, I hit the plus sign, and it wants to do it, footer or container then footer. I'm just gonna, because I'm only gonna have one footer, gonna simplify my code a little. Put my cursor on the end, hit return. And then here, right, I'm going to go to font, and I'm going to make this a gray. And if I go down to font size, I have a lot of options here. I'm just going to go with pixels, and I'm going to do that. So now you'll notice that it's just the small footer text at the bottom. So just like that, I showed you how to do a few basic things using Dreamweaver CC. I'm going to save all, and I'm going to preview this in Firefox. Now I'm on a computer I haven't used that often, so I've actually not used Firefox on this, but you'll see that as you get used to CSS Designer, especially if you're new to CSS, I think you're going to find you like it better. Now the issue comes up is for people who are really experienced, you might find it actually slows you down. So here it is, you can see this is my header tag, this is my body tag with my class. You can see that I've used CSS to keep this to 960 width, and you can see that my footer is smaller. So hopefully this was helpful for those who are new to Dreamweaver CC. Thanks.